Hello, welcome to the Let's Talk Kids Health live show, episode 69. I'm Dr. Narissa Bauer, your host. I'm a behavioral pediatrician and CEO of Let's Talk Kids Health. As you know, the concept of this show is to share information about behavioral health, parenting, and family wellness. Each week, I bring you topics and guests to help me advance this mission so that we can all talk together. Now, let us know that you're here by commenting, asking questions, and liking at any time. This episode was pre-recorded, but if you have any questions or comments, please post them as we will watch out and we will come back and answer any questions. Now, the replay will just be immediately available after the broadcast. So as you're watching and you're seeing this and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish so-and-so were here. Don't worry, you can just share the episode because sharing is caring. Now, if you don't want to miss future episodes or maybe check out some of the past ones, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Narissa Bauer MD, follow my blog Facebook page, Let's Talk Kids Health, and join my free parenting discussion group. Now, today's topic is all about the power of relationships to help protect children with guests Sarah Rock and Dr. Rachel Gilgoff. Sarah is the principal of Rock Results, a private consulting firm. Sarah started her career working in early child education and with children with severe mental illness before becoming a child abuse and neglect attorney. After recognizing the necessity of supporting parents and caregivers, Sarah shifted her focus to upstream prevention efforts. She has extensive experience working in mental health and early childhood and has expertise in ACEs, resilience, and relational health. Her passion is working with and for families to try and shift power back to families and communities. So excited to have her. Dr. Rachel Gilgoff brings over 10 years of experience as a board-certified general pediatrician and child abuse pediatrician. After 10 years of working at the Center for Child Protection at the UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital and Research Center in Oakland as a child abuse pediatrician, Dr. Gilgoff has transitioned to prevention efforts, program development, and research. She is currently working as a clinical and science senior advisor to the ACEs Aware initiative with the Aurrera Health Group and the Office of the California Surgeon General. Dr. Gilgoff is also dedicated to addressing health issues resulting from child abuse and toxic stress and moving the field forward to incorporate trauma interventions into routine pediatric clinical practice. We have a powerhouse here today, and I am just so excited to welcome both of you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
Really glad to be here.
Yes. And this is such an important topic. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this now. I mean, obviously, we've been living through this pandemic. Mental health, behavioral issues, trauma has always existed prior to the pandemic. However, the one good thing, if I should say, is that the pandemic has really amplified and helped the public understand why we need to do something about this. Prevention. I love the fact that both of you are now shifting to that prevention work. As a pediatrician, right? That's kind of where we live and breathe, and we love that. So thank you to both of you for the work that you're doing around this.
And for all the work you're doing and for having us here. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, before we get actually started into the questions that we have prepared today and for this conversation, I was just interested in maybe asking each of you, because some kids want to be a teacher or be an astronaut or be a president. I don't know, but like, I'm just so curious. I love to know how each of you landed doing this work. And Sarah, maybe you want to go first?
Sure. I love to talk about it. And I think the other interesting thing to note is the partnership that Rachel and I have, which I think exists in part, obviously, for our shared passion and our belief in parents and parent strengths, but also that we have to work from different perspectives in this work. Because children need not just a village, but they need a lot of us professionals out there working across our perspectives and sharing knowledge. And so we work a lot together for that purpose. But I came to the work because I originally worked with kids with severe mental illness and saw the impact the systems that had on those kids, Narissa. And so decided to be a lawyer, to be an advocate for those kids, speaking for them in their voice, because the system they were not part of the system, dynamics. And then when I was a lawyer, I realized that we were attacking the problem from the wrong end. By the time kids get to court or have been abused and neglected, the trauma is so high and so great and so deep. It's quite a challenge to undo it. If we're lucky, we can help heal people. But I became, at that point, I moved into social services and started family resource centers and several other different kind of early intervention programs. And so I've got a lot of program experience working directly with families, like home visiting and parent education and literacy programs and so on, that are all about trying to figure out how to help parents get the resources they want, not even what we would say need, but what they really want to help their families thrive. So I have this passion around it. You can see it's kind of evolved to always trying to go to the root causes and where can I best spend my time and passion to help people do what they want rather than do to them. So, and I've done a myriad of other things along the way, but that's how, and I started my own consulting practice to do the wide variety that I was interested in. So.
Wow, Sarah, I thank you for sharing that story, your journey, and it's always evolving, right? But
Always
what I
evolving.
love about this is that it's the work that you're doing is in alignment with where your passion is. I just saw you light up there. And your early experiences informed you to the fact that, gosh, we've got to act earlier. I've got to do something about it, and every step
do something. And I think that's a great point, Narissa, because if thinking about people thinking about what they want to do for their careers and things, that maybe Rachel and I can be, a vote of confidence for those folks, which is, keep your eye on the ball. What is it that you want to do for kids, right?
Yes.
What is it you really want to do? And what's the best way to do that? And forget your training, forget what people said you should have been doing, and go after the outcomes you're trying to achieve. So anyway, thank you for letting me interject that one point. But
yeah, no, I love that. It takes a village. It takes a village. Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why Sarah and I hit it off so well way back when, because I was working as a child abuse pediatrician and just getting really jaded with the system and and even my role in the system, because as a forensic pediatrician, you're really just diagnosing child abuse and then not really part of the solution in terms of healing, right? I mean, we go to court and we talk to social workers and lawyers, and that's all really important, collaborative, multidisciplinary work, but I wasn't getting to really help the parents heal, help the kids heal. And so I did do a big pivot and wanted to work more in this. How can we help people heal? How can we support parents? How can we prevent, right? How can we create a system where parents don't feel so stressed out that they have to hurt their kids or, lose it. Because, every parent I talked to, they didn't want to hurt their kids. They love their kids. And it was just that moment of awful stress. And so how could we create more nurturing systems? And it really drove me to see how important relationships are and healing relationships. And on the flip side, how if you have, as an adult, if you didn't have that as a kid, you didn't have those role models, maybe being in relationship is scary. Maybe you don't feel like you can trust people, that's so hard, but we have strategies. Like there are ways that we can heal, even if that's us, right? Even if we don't trust, even if we are scared of relationships, there's so many resources out there and healing paths that we just, Sarah and I connected and we wanted to get people these strategies and these tools and these healing paths. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, why don't we jump on in and start with this first question? Why are we talking about relational health today? And I like the term relational health. I'm hoping one of you can help us kind of understand that.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of take that on, and we won't get too technical or clinical about that. We do have a clinical definition for pediatricians and other professionals, but when we're talking about relational health, we're really talking about that interconnectedness between relationships and health. So these are things that we take for granted, right? And you think, why do we have to label that? And I think what we saw during COVID is a great sort of descriptor of why that's necessary. We talked all through the pandemic about the importance of connections, not being socially isolated, the impact of isolation, right? All of that was about relationships. We watched our seniors, our elders, very often decline from that lack of engagement with other human beings and other networks of support. So one of the reasons we wanted to talk about that today is because of the relevance to the pandemic, but obviously relationships are foundational for all kinds of health and mental health reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about them a lot in child development, and I think, and you guys may disagree with me on this, but so much of relational health has been only talked about really either with seniors or maybe with early childhood. But really, we see this as a connecting factor for our life course, right? So relationships always matter. And the things that matter, what we consider relational health to be, are things like your personal relationships, as well as your relationships that you have in your networks of support. So your systems in your community, for example, right? So it's not just your immediate circles, but maybe you have layers of circles, right? You got people very close to you, like my husband and my children, I'd put in my immediate circle. And then outside of that might be my neighbors and other people that I go to. And beyond that, there's an even bigger circle in my community, my doctor and folks like that, or your church counselor. So we have different levels of support that are very, very important. And we have also the quality of those. So when we talk about relational health, we think about it, and you can, parents on the line and stuff, and caregivers can think about it in terms of, what's the quality of my relationships? Having a relationship with an abusive partner that might be causing you harm is maybe not the kind of relationship you want to have. So you may have a relationship with a partner, but is it of the quality that's going to help you be the parent or caregiver and person you want to be? So you have the quality, you have the diversity of different kinds of relationships, and the variety. So variety is really important. So, there's a lot of, and all of this that we're going to be sharing with you today is evidence-based. It comes from the science. We're not just, self-help people. It's really the science shows all of these are important and in different combinations. So you might have an immediate circle that meets all of your needs in terms of relational health, but most of us need a variety of things and a variety of kinds of relationships, because as life throws these stressors and adversities at you, you need different people for different things, right? Like my mom always said, don't put your eggs in one basket. Don't just have one friend. And I'm like, now I get it. She couldn't explain why that was important. So hopefully y'all can do that when you go back to your kids after today, but don't put your eggs in one basket. So that's relational health, basically in a nutshell. We can tell you a lot more about it on our website, which I know we'll share later. But I also want to stress that relational health has very concrete positive effect on things like stress and mitigating the effects of stress. It can help reduce child abuse, which we think comes from people who are very stressed out. Mm-hmm. It can improve your parent-child relationships, all kinds of good outcomes that come from that. It obviously supports your cognitive, social, and emotional skills as a developing child. So a kid who doesn't have a relationship to be able to do that is going to have impaired functioning in those realms. So I was thinking, I know it's a big thing now in schools that they're actually teaching social emotional learning with math, which I think is awesome, because I was terrified of math, which is probably why I'm an attorney and not a scientist. But anyway, so kids are getting more of that in school, but it really starts at home, and it starts with relationships of all kinds. So I'll stop there, because we could go on and on just about the definition, but I know you have a lot of questions.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing and so good, so good. And I was just like writing notes. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about this. I have to add this too. But we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Okay. So, but thank you for that. That was awesome, and thank you for helping us understand that definition, because I always want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Mm-hmm. So the next question, so how and why are healthy relationships important for parents? I think you kind of started touching on this, Sarah, but maybe if we can kind of elaborate and expand upon that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I can jump in on this one. It's just so, you mentioned this in the beginning, right? It's so hard right now with COVID, and we're seeing our kids struggle academically with their friends, with depression, anxiety, but that means it's hard to be a parent too, because we're parenting these kids and really trying to navigate these minefields for our kids. And so there's so many reasons for both kids and parents to be stressed, and I just want parents to know you're not alone. and that it's really important to nourish ourselves and nourish our relationships, right? So when we're talking about relational health, we'll definitely get into that parent-child relationship, but also taking a step back and really thinking about ourselves as parents and nourishing, do we have those safe, supportive, close relationships? Who could we talk to at 2 a.m. when we're feeling really stressed and our kid has a fever and now we're worried about COVID, right? And how do we nourish those community supports and getting engaged in volunteer work or faith-based organizations, right? And taking that time to nourish those, and I keep using the word nourish because I do think it takes some, effort and intention, calling our friends and our relatives and taking time to go and have coffee or invite your friend for a walk and thinking about all those things. And I'm so glad, Sarah, too, you mentioned that it's evidence-based. Like, this is so important for our health, our mental health and our physical health. And one of my favorite researchers in this field, her name is Dr. Julianne Holt-Lunstad. She did a TED Talk, so watch it. It's really great. And she looked at how long we live based on both our safe, supportive relationships and our networks of relationships. And both of those make you live longer. And the really cool thing she did is she compared that to other things that are really healthy for us. And she found that having those relationships is as important as quitting smoking for our health. It's more important than how much we weigh, how much we exercise, and how much we drink. And even how high our blood pressure is.
Yeah.
And we know, we're, Dr. Bauer, right? Those are so important for our health. And relationships are just as important. And so really being intentional, because then we're modeling that for our kids, right? So if we have all those safe, supportive relationships, we're modeling how important that is for our kids. Plus, then they get those relationships too. They have another person that they could call and talk to if they're feeling stressed out. And we also know kids do what we do more than what we say they should do. So if we do it for ourselves, we're really doing it for our kids too.
Rachel, can I just before sorry, Sarah, but this sort of just gosh. So 2 things. The TED Talk, we will make sure to add that in the show notes so you can go watch that. But a couple things. So the American Academy of Pediatrics actually has a campaign called Find Your 3. And it is so important what you were just saying. This fits really nicely because we live in a community. We can't do it alone. It really does take a village. But I'm thinking about, families or parents or individuals who've experienced trauma of whatever sort, right? It can be hard to reach out and ask for help. It can be hard to put yourself out there and ask for help watching your child if potentially you are a victim of abuse and you have worries about that happening to your child, right? And so I guess to either of you, what would you say to someone watching who is feeling this, like, I understand this intuitively that I need to reach out for help, but it is not in my nature to do this? What would you say to them?
I am so glad you asked about that, because just as you talked about, as I mentioned before, if we struggle with relationships from our own childhood, that really can compromise our ability to engage in relationships, to feel safe in relationships, as you're saying, to reach out and learn those skills. But I'm so glad you're saying this, because I want people to know that we can heal and we can learn these skills. It's never too late. At any age, you can learn these things, and there are a lot of really great supportive resources out there. For one thing, just talking to your doctor about this, because then your doctor can link you to those resources and know that. And it could be your pediatrician or your own medical internist or family medicine doc, whoever your provider is. They should hopefully know about these things, and they definitely know about resources for interpartner violence, domestic violence. They know about family resource centers and family justice centers. They know the text lines and helplines, and we could put some of those in the notes in the chat as well. And this is actually, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, because this is one of Sarah's expertise too, is really knowing about those community supports that are out there for people who are struggling. And we all are struggling, and it really is so important to reach out. It really, as hard as it is, and I went through my bump in the road in February, and that's really what got me out, is reaching out to my network.
Well, and it's funny, Narissa, I was just going to add on to what Rachel said when you asked your question, which is easier said than done, right? I mean, I'm hearing that. I'm an overwhelmed parent. All of us are overwhelmed. Those of us who have adequate or ample resources are probably in a better place than those who do not have it. But the reality is expecting parents and caregivers to find the time to take care of themselves and then take care of their kids can be a real stretch. And we want to honor that, we recognize that, and not honor that we know it's really hard and it may be impossible for you now. So a couple of tips though. One, even one relationship can make the difference, right? For you or your kid. So I'm not a big fan of the expression that just one child and one adult in the life of a child is enough. It isn't really. They need a whole world of people, but it can make all the difference at that point in time with that crisis. And it's certainly better than none. So if you can do one thing, talk to your neighbor, start a conversation while you're waiting in line at the pharmacist. These micro connections are also very powerful. I felt that way. I don't know about you guys, but during COVID, when I started to talk to strangers again, I'm like, oh my gosh, it just felt so good. It felt like what we're supposed to be doing as a social species, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do that. Do one thing. Don't think you have to go out and join the book club or anything, because if you're feeling overwhelmed, then it has to be something you can manage, and it has to be something you do not beat yourself up over if you have a challenge. So literally that could be, if you see your neighbor out front, you get yourself outside and you say hello and you exchange 5 minutes, and then maybe over that time that grows into a relationship. So you don't have to have this super large network. It's great for some people to have that, but having anything is a good idea. And think about relationships you already have, as Rachel kind of alluded to, and deepening the quality of those. Like, I've never opened up to my neighbor about the stress I was feeling about something, and I could. I have that relationship now where I think I'm at the step I could share with her. So you may have people that you might want to just take it to the next level, and you may be amazed because they're probably waiting for you to ask or looking forward to helping. So just a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, and that's so great. I mean, even that little step it's the hardest, but it can also be totally reinforcing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to work that, that habit and make it a habit. But hopefully those watching today, if this is resonating with you and you feel brave enough to sort of say, I'm committed to finding my 3 and doing that, we will cheer you on, because again, nobody can do this alone. And it just starts with at least one, but it can snowball from there.
Right. Like any kind of sort of behavioral challenge, behavior changes take tiny little atomic steps, right? That's what we like to talk about. And to Rachel's point too about networking with resources, to that I would say many have been disruptive by COVID and the pandemic, but many others have flourished as a result. But I would recommend that you go to somebody in the know. So if you have a neighborhood where you have one person who knows everything, go to her, him. Go to your family resource center, your church, go to some place where they are in the habit of connecting people to resources. You don't have to try to do it alone, because there are people who make a living out of this and are passionate about it. Find one of those folks. They're everywhere.
Yes. And again, don't forget your pediatrician, primary care provider, because, I know that sometimes it can be hard to sort of figure out how in the 15 minutes that you're going to bring all this up. But, believe me, I am involved in efforts with the American Academy of Pediatrics to help bring this education to the frontline people. And we know, pediatricians know, and they want to do this. It's just like, maybe even if they don't bring it up, hopefully you have that relationship with them where even if they don't bring it up, you can just drop something and say, I kind of want to talk to you about something today that I think has been weighing on me or affecting me or my child. And believe me, they will want to hear this and make more time for that.
And that's great that you said that. It's such an important point in all of this work about relational health and connecting to resources. Ideally, the parent caregiver drives it. Otherwise, folks are guessing about what your greatest worries are. So we would encourage folks to feel empowered, because as you said, Marissa, I think doctors want to know, people in the caring professions want to know. So feel free. We encourage you to share what you're able.
So So this is really great, and I love this discussion so far. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for a long time, but I really want to sort of kind of go with this next. Like, what are some just concrete ways parents can support their relationships with their kids? Like, we just talked about community and reaching out to other adults and resources, but like now let's kind of turn it back to the family within. How can we nurture that positive parent-child relationship? Starting in the home.
And I can start with this one. I really love the book, The Whole Brain Child by
Yes.
Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. Has anybody done the hand-brain model on your show before?
No, but well,
Go
actually,
Rachel.
maybe they did, but do it again.
Do it again. Okay. I got to make sure I'm a little backwards.
Yep, you're good.
But your hand can look like a brain, and so the wrist is like the brainstem that controls the automatic functions like breathing and heart rate. And then if I open, the thumb is like the limbic system, the emotional centers, and then the fingers, especially here, right here, it's like behind your forehead, is your prefrontal cortex, or the thinking part of the brain. And what Dr. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson talk about is flipping our lids when we're stressed out, and meaning that the emotional centers are in control and that we're not actually in our thinking brain at all, which is really great, right? Like if a tiger's about to attack me, I don't want to be thinking about plan A, plan B. I really do need to just go with the instinct and get all my hormones geared to running away, right? But it's really helpful for us as parents first to think about making sure we don't flip our lid as much as is possible, right? And thinking about all those strategies to keep our thinking brain online, even when our kids are driving us totally bonkers. And we've all been there. I definitely have. So, taking our own big, deep breaths, even removing ourselves from the situation if we need to for a sec, but getting back online. But really, it's great because it helps us see what's going on for our kids. So when our kids are in that emotional state, often as a parent, I want to problem solve. I want to tell them, like, I can see the problem. Let's just do it, right? But they really can't think. They really can't hear what you're saying. And so we have to, what Dr. Siegel says is connect, then redirect. So connect first with that emotion that the kid's having. Really be curious about what's going on for that kid in their emotional state and what's stressing them out, what's driving that emotion. Then once the kid's back online, right? Once their thinking brain's online, that's when then you could engage with that logical thing. And I know for me, so often it's like, oh, but this is going to take long and I got to get to work, right? Or we have to get to this appointment. I don't have time to connect with your emotions right now, but it actually ends up being shorter in the long run, even though we don't really think about that. And, thinking about the kid who won't go to school and you're going, oh, but maybe if you connect, you might find out that they actually were bullied yesterday at school, or they got in a big fight with their friend and they're actually really worried about what they're going to do at school. And so now the root cause of those emotions and that problem, and you could really then help them in a more meaningful way and connect. So connect, then redirect is really one of my favorites. And that Whole Brain Child is a great book to talk about a lot of that stuff.
Yes, and I'll put that book link in the show notes too. I love that. And it's such a great visual for kids. I mean, they can really understand that. And that's why I think it's so great that you just shared that as well.
And it's kinesthetic, right? It involves a movement, which helps recall and memory and, using it. So it's cool.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because when you're like, oh, did anybody else talk about it? I'm like, we've talked about this. And I know that like Dr. Amy Shriver, who's been on, and, Gretchen Pianka, we've talked about these topics. I think we have talked about it, but can't remember exactly sure if they actually did the model, but thank you for doing that, because I think it's such a great one to do. Any other suggestions or any other thoughts, that are coming up?
Really closely related to that is something that Rachel already alluded to, which is the idea of kids building skills, right? So if they aren't aware of their feelings, what might be actually going on, they're going to if they don't know the skills or haven't been taught how to manage stress, how to manage a strong flood of emotions, then, we can't expect them to manage them appropriately, right? So again, relational health is so important here because kids learn through their caregivers, through their caring adults, about how to deal with stressful situations. They're watching you, they're seeing you, but they might also need the words and the techniques like, well, it looks like you need some time by yourself. And, I had to teach my really volatile 4-year-old daughter to just, take deep breaths and count to 10. And, she was like so mad the whole time she was doing it. I know you all are familiar with that. So use whatever bag of tricks you can, but I think what's important here in both Rachel's example and this one is bringing that awareness that if you can stop and step back mentally and look at what's really going on and consider what is behind it, what kinds of stressors might be present, that's going to help a lot. And I think, just remembering in our busy days where we're frantic and our stress is going up, it becomes a little bit harder and harder to slow down and think about that. But if there's some trick you can do to help you remember, oh, wait, I remember that if my kid is yelling or showing frustration, that I should stop and think about what's behind it. Even if you do that for 5 seconds, that is going to make a difference. It's going to make a difference to your stress level, their stress level, and also provide you an opportunity to slow down and maybe teach them something about how to handle that particular moment. And really young kids can learn this very, very early, right? I mean, so think about whether do they have the skills to do this. And a lot of times kids don't have the skills, and particularly kids who have had trauma are, they very likely have their executive function impaired. My oldest has he has impaired executive function. He was born with it, and he cannot tell dates. So because he can't tell dates, he has a very hard time keeping a schedule. And so if one knows this about himself or his parents or his employers, they can help, they can understand that he's using different compensatory strategies. He still has to make things on time, but his own personal reaction to that stress is different because he's aware that he's got to continue to learn how to manage that skill issue. Mm-hmm. So there's that. And there's one last one, and I don't know how close we are to being done, but let me just share in a really practical way, along with that list of thinking of 3 people in your circle who can help you, is the idea of just taking 15 minutes a day to connect with your kids in a relational health way. Make eye contact, listen to them, or talk to them. Maybe hopefully listen, but sometimes your kid just wants you to talk to them. I get it. But do something where you really engage. I don't mean be present and be on your phone, push them on the swing and talk to the neighbor, but be present with them for 15 minutes. And you might be pleasantly surprised about how far that 15 minutes in goes. It's like, how we all time out, the idea of time out. So this is the idea of time in, with a concentrated attention to the quality of your relationship. So would love to leave people with that concrete tip as something that you might feel like you can handle.
Yeah, I love that. And you are speaking my speak. I mean, this is so great. I love it. And, I just to kind of, parents are like, oh, 15 minutes. How do I do that? Thinking about because some parents are like, I got 2 shifts over here. I got to do this. But if you're in the car, you're riding. I mean, it could even be during that captive time, or my kids really love, even my son's going to be 15, my daughter's 12. They still want me to come upstairs and and I love that. I love that. I still just kind of have just a few quiet moments with each of them. Touching, connecting about their day, what's going on, what are we looking forward to?
And that's a lot. I don't want to say that's enough. It might be, it may not be, but you should feel like that's the kind of work you want to be doing as a parent. That stuff is super valuable. Those moments, Narissa. So great example.
Yeah, and meal times. Talking about the highlights and lowlights, or positives and things. Just having that conversation, that connection, it's so important. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, and to your point too, just for parents to know that we actually don't have to be in sync all the time to be perfect, great parents. And they've done those studies too. And the good parents with thriving kids are actually only in sync with their kids probably 30% of the time.
Yes.
So it's actually okay. And actually that builds resilience too, right? Because resilience is that ability to cope through challenge and bounce forward after challenge. So having even those bumps in the road in relationships is resilience building, right? So it's what we do. Resilience is in that repair. So even if we have that moment where like, oh, I wasn't my best self as a parent, it's okay. And we can circle back to that moment and really repair and talk to our kids through it. So yeah, I just want parents to know it's not about being on it and perfect all the time either. There's so much grace in this, and
Ever, yeah.
Not perfect ever. Yeah.
We're building resilience when we show kids that you can have a disagreement, you cannot be on the same page about something and still support each other and still love each other and still get back to that positive, happy place a little bit later.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What an amazing conversation. I mean, like I said, we could seriously keep talking, but so I'm going to ask you guys, like, where could people find out more information about what we talked about today? Can one of you share it and point us in the right direction?
Yeah, so Narissa, we have a website, and on that website, there's some information about relational health, but most importantly, there's a whole online course that only takes about 3 hours, but you could learn it 20 minutes at a time. It was written for pediatricians, so there's some doctory language in there, but there's also some really great stuff about ACEs and all these sort of tips and things and tools that Rachel's been talking about are in there. So thank you for sharing that. We encourage people to visit it. And, you can contact either Rachel or I through that website. And then we will be sharing a few other additional resources in those notes. So this is a good place to start, and we could steer you in the other direction for lots of other resources depending on what you need.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I really love this work. I've checked out the website, and it's so important to make sure that the folks that families reach out to have this information, because I think that's one of the worst things that you feel when you are asked something and then you're like, oh gosh, I don't even know where to go, or how do I handle that, right? So I love that this course is there for pediatric professionals, providers, and it's just good to know. Good to know to share this even with families that, that there are resources like this to make sure everybody's on the same page and understand the importance of it. So thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for yours and your commitment
thank
to
you
it
for
as
all the
well.
work you're doing and the AAP. It's really fabulous. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's, it's fun, right? I mean, this is what, sort of gets us like jazzed and, being able to do this work. And so meeting the two of you has been so wonderful. And I hope that we can continue the conversation too. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and those of you watching, I know that this was pre-recorded, but do not hesitate. If you're a pediatric provider or a pediatric a provider or someone who cares about kids, you want to learn more. Maybe that course isn't quite right, but look, we've got Rachel and Sarah. They could point you in the right direction. They've got a whole host of knowledge. So just don't be afraid to reach out to them. You can post any questions, comments as you're watching this, and we will come back. My team will come back and monitor. And if there's a question there that I don't know the answer to, I'll shoot it over to them. So don't worry, we got you. And so, and then also too, I just want you to know that if you've been watching the show and following along, you have another topic or guest, or maybe you want to come on the show, please email me at drnarissa@letstalkkidshealth.org, or just DM me, PM me on all these different social media outlets, because I am everywhere. And so please, let's keep that conversation going. And you know what? I could have planned this any better, because next week, guess what? I have got my friend Kathleen Davis, who I got to meet through important work around this topic at the AAP, and she has agreed to come on, and she will be talking to us about when your child is struggling, Resiliency 101 for parents, from survival to thrival. So be sure to tune in next week for that episode. And again, we will make sure that this video has all those resources that came up during this important and fun conversation. So again, thank you to you both. And for those of you watching, tune in next week. That's it for now. Bye-bye.